everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to... Yeah. What are you gonna do? Joe's great. He's a serial killer, but he's great. Which I was like, yes, yes, and yes. Even though those were only two things and I said yes 3 times. I have a replacement of a book that I wanted. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is gonna be not like a crazy book haul, but I haven't filmed a video in a while. I have picked up some books in the interim. I have a couple of arcs here that I wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to share a few books that I've picked up that I'm super jazzed to be reading or to get to read, and I wanted to tell you about them. So if you've seen my April wrap up, then you've already heard me talk about House of Holo by Crystal Sutherland. And if you haven't, I will link it for you so you can check it out. But this is like horror, fantasy, fairy tale, somewhat grounded in reality, about 3 sisters who 10 years ago disappeared off a street in Scotland when they were children. And then a month later, they just reappeared on the exact same street. And they have no memory of where they were. They have no memory of what happened to them. And for all intents and purposes, they seem to be okay, except for the fact that their dark hair has now turned kind of white blonde and their blue eyes have turned black. But other than that, totally cool. And their parents are super jazzed to have them back, so no questions asked. They just, here we go, here we go, here we go. But 10 years later, when the book opens, the oldest sister, Gray, disappears again. And she kind of leaves a trail of breadcrumbs for her sisters, Vivi and Iris, to find her. And that trail may or may not help figure out what happened to them all those years ago. So we see this from Iris's perspective. It's great fun. Like I said, listen or watch my April review for all the things, but loved it. And I'm trying to get better about buying books that I want to read right away and then actually reading them. So one, I bought it, read it, so we're doing well there. The next book I have is The Mary Shelley Club. And I'll be honest, this says a little bit Scream, a little bit Gossip Girl, a pulpy page-turning suspenseful read that keeps you up all night. When I saw it was like Scream and Gossip Girl, I was like, yes. And then I went on Goldie Moldavsky's website, and she does character profiles for all the characters in this book, and each one of the characters has to pick their favorite Joshua Jackson role. And I was like, I'm already obsessed with this book and I'm already obsessed with this author, and I haven't even read it yet. So I would probably say Pacey as my favorite Joshua Jackson role. I still love him to pieces. So this book follows a girl named Rachel Chavez, and she is at Manchester Prep. Cruel Intentions, right? And she kind of gets caught up in a prank that goes wrong. But the upside is it attracts the attention of this club, the Mary Shelley Club. And it's a mysterious society of students who orchestrate elaborate pranks known as fear tests, which are inspired by urban legends and movie tropes. So she gets caught up in these games, and then, as you can guess, things are just gonna go all sorts of wrong. And it says, when someone begins targeting the club itself, Rachel has to track down the killer, even if it means finally confronting the dark secrets from her past. So deliciously dark, subversive humor. I just can't wait. So what I will say, main reason I haven't picked it up yet, I haven't read Frankenstein, you guys, but I got it for free because I guess it's like public domain, so you can get it for free. And I want to read Frankenstein before I read this, because you don't have to, but I know that there's Frankenstein references and winks and nods. So I kind of want to go in sort of fully educated, if you will. So I'm going to read Frankenstein, then I'm going to read this. But I'm really excited about it. And it just sounds like so fun. I mean, I love Scream. There's a new Scream movie coming out. I don't know if it's this summer or like end of the year, which I can't wait. I'm obsessed with Scream too. So this one just sounds really fun. So I went for it. So it's happening soon. I just have to read Frankenstein first. The next book I got, which I obviously couldn't resist either, is You Love Me by Carolyn Kempness. So this is book number 3 in the You series, following our beloved serial killer, Joe Goldberg. And Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand, if you haven't watched her, she does like a dedicated review of this. Like, she bought it and like went home and read it and just compulsively read it. And she really enjoyed it. So I was asking her and I was like, is it worth buying right away? And she's like, it's totally worth buying right away. So I did, and here it is. And I'm really excited to get into it. So I know we kind of fast forward a little bit. Joe is now in the Pacific Northwest, and he meets a woman who is a librarian. So he goes from bookstore in number 1, and then, I'll be honest. So I loved book number 1. I don't totally remember how Hidden Bodies ended, so I need to go back and just sort of like refresh my memory. And I know she gives you like a catch up in here because, of course, I've listened to tons of Carolyn Kepnes interviews, but in book number 2, he was in LA, and then this one, like I said, Pacific Northwest. So it's Joe being Joe, and I'm totally here for it. I love him. I'm just obsessed with these books. I'm obsessed with the story. So I saw the first season of You after I read the book. The book is totally better, but the show is good. I didn't wind up watching season 2, and I didn't love Hidden Bodies as much as I loved You, but I totally love Joe, and I'm excited for this. And it sounds like this one's a little bit more like book number 1, which I'm totally here for, but I'm just excited for it. I'm excited to be back in his head, which I know sounds super crazy, but you know, what are you gonna do? Joe's great. He's a serial killer, but he's great. I mean, he's like Ripley-esque serial killer. So it's all good. Okay, the next book I got, when I saw Riley Sager tweet about this, I was like, done and done. And that is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. So I didn't know anything about this. I saw Riley Sager tweet about it and I was like, what is this book that he speaks of? And this is out in the UK now. I think it comes out in the US, I want to say in September. So I got this from Book Depository. So if you want to read it now, you can get it. And I will talk about this more in my May wrap up, but this is definitely one of the weirdest books I've ever read in my entire life. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I buddy read this with Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library. I would highly recommend you either buddy read this with someone because you're gonna need to talk about it kind of constantly, or find a friend who's already read it that you can be like, what am I reading? Because this is one of those books where I would say go into it as blind as humanly possible and just stick with it. Just totally stick with it. Because there were points where I was just like, I'm not sure what's happening here. So I'm just gonna read you the little blurb on the inside because it's all you need to know. It says it's the story of a murderer, a stolen child, revenge. This is the story of Ted, who lives with his daughter Lauren and his cat Olivia in an ordinary house at the end of an ordinary street. All these things are true, yet some of them are lies. So it has no resemblance to The Wife Between Us by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, but it reminds me of that in that it's sort of like, you think you know, but you have no idea. This book will mess with you. I would recommend being messed with if you were here for it. You just gotta trust the process with this book. You gotta trust the process, go in, and just stay with it. And I would say you won't be sorry. And then the last book that I bought, I have mentioned this here before too. I was trying to replace some of my mass market paperbacks from back in the day because I still have a handful of them because they're books that I absolutely love and want to reread again, want to have in my collection. And I finally, I don't even know how I wound up coming across this because I feel like I've been searching for this for a while. It's a hardcover, A Time to Kill by John Grisham. This book is so much heavier. I have the paperback, which I feel like is giant in and of itself, but I did it. So I have Sycamore Row, which I want to read, which is the second book, and then the third book in the series came out, I want to say A Time for Mercy. And I don't have that one yet. So I'm trying not to get, like I said, too ahead of myself. But I want to reread this before I read Sycamore Row. And I know that Matthew McConaughey has signed on to do another show, movie, reprise his role. So I'm here for it. I'm totally here for it. I'm all in. He was a beautifully magnificent Jake Brigance. I loved this book. I read The Firm first, and then I went back and read this. And this book just absolutely blew me away. I haven't read this book in ages, you guys, but I remember just being so just like blown out of the water by his writing and the page turning and the storytelling and all of it. I loved this book. I probably would say this is my favorite John Grisham, so I'm gonna reread it. I have a real giant copy of it. This is definitely not going to be, when the time comes, a book that I'm going to commute with, but I'm super excited to have it. This was a long time coming, and here it is. So the first arc I have is Mary Jane, and this is by Jessica Anya Blau, and this was sent to me by Custom House, which is part of William Morrow, and I'm actually reading it right now, as you can see. This comes out the second week of May, so actually by the time you guys are watching this, this book is already out. And this follows a girl named Mary Jane, and it was kind of likened to Daisy Jones and the Six and Almost Famous, which I was like, yes, yes, and yes. Even though those were only two things and I said yes 3 times. But this is a coming of age story about 14-year-old Mary Jane, and it takes place in 1975. And she lives in a suburb in Baltimore, and she has sort of these very straight-laced proper parents, and she winds up getting a nannying gig for a new family in the neighborhood, and they are this very kind of hip, cool bohemian family. And it's like a whole new world for Mary Jane. So she's taking care of their 5-year-old daughter, and Mr. Cohn is a psychiatrist, and his wife is just sort of this free-spirited, just super engaging woman, and Mary Jane just is part of their world, is part of their household, is part of their family, and it just completely opens up her eyes to everything and to a whole new world, and she is kind of obsessed with it. So I'm not quite halfway through with it. I'm very much enjoying it. I will give you guys a full review by the time I finish it, or when I finish it, but I'm enjoying it. So again, I spent so much of April reading really dark and messed up books, and I just finished The Last House on Needless Street. So this is a great new place to be, and I'm enjoying. It's been a long time since I've read like a true coming of age story. And so far, I would say Gen Xers will enjoy the nostalgia of this because there's some great references. So I'm enjoying this one. And by references, I don't mean like necessarily historical references, but like she talks about like Legos and Light Bright and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun. So the next 2 arcs I have are from Celadon Books, and the first one is called We Are the Brennans by Tracy Lang. So in this book we follow Sunday Brennan, and she's 29, she's living in Los Angeles, and when the book opens she's actually in a terrible car accident. And she wakes up in the hospital, bruised, battered, and in need of some help recuperating. So she winds up going back to New York where her family is, and she left New York 5 years earlier with little to no explanation, leaving not just her family behind, but her high school sweetheart, who was also maybe kind of totally her fiance. So they may not be totally welcoming her back with arms wide open, but it sounds kind of like a family drama, and it says there's just like secrets, there is resentment amongst the family. So we kind of have like a reluctant return home vibe. We've got a lot of twisted family stuff going on here. Not like twisted, it's not like a murder mystery, but like family drama kind of twisted secrets. And it's the secrets that have damaged the family for generations and will threaten everything they know about their lives. So I'm super curious about this one. You know, give me an Irish pub, give me some family drama, the redemptive power of love. So it just sounds really intriguing. So I'm excited for this one. And this one comes out in August. And then the second book that Celadon sent me is a nonfiction book, and it's called Love People, Use Things, Because the Opposite Never Works. And this is by the Minimalists, Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus. And they have a podcast. I want to say they have a Netflix show now, and they have tons of videos on YouTube. So if you guys have followed me for a while, know that I struggle with decluttering, and I have struggled to try and declutter many times over the years. And I've watched a lot of videos and like to-dos and guidance and all sorts of things about minimalism. And I didn't specifically request this book, but it's like, do you ever feel like the universe is sending you a message? So it's like the universe is talking to me, and I've watched a bunch of their videos. So it's all about, you know, imagining a life with less, you know, less clutter, less stress, fewer distractions. And when you create that kind of a life, you open up room for so much more in your life, is the theory behind this. So in this book, they talk about how you move past simple decluttering to show how minimalism makes room to reevaluate and heal the 7 essential relationships in our lives: stuff, truth, self, money, values, creativity, and people. They use their own experiences and those of the people they have met along the minimalist journey to provide a template for how to live a fuller, more meaningful life. Because once you have less, you can make room for the right kind of more. So I'm really intrigued by this book. And I I'm not trying to be, you know, the kind of person who has like nothing. Let's be honest, I'm never going to be a minimalist, but I have more than I need. I have a very hard time letting go of things, and I feel the stress that it can create being surrounded by stuff and the impact that that has on you. So I'm really interested to read this book and to read about their journey and hopefully get some good tips and tricks from it. So this book comes out in July of this year, obviously this year. So thank you to Celadon for sending me 2 books, and thank you again to Custom House for sending me Mary Jane. So that is going to do it for a little bit of a mini haul. Let me know if you guys have bought anything lately, anything that's on your list, if there's any of these books that have you intrigued, and we can catch up down below. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye everybody.